welcome to SF Ruby at Sentry. This is our special Ruby&AI edition. So I guess a bunch of people here are for the AI. Okay, who's actually used Ruby? Okay, everybody's here for Ruby. Okay, perfect. All right, so I want to repeat something I was talking about the last time. When we were talking about Ruby and about the whole ecosystem, it includes many different aspects. And yes, there are engineers, there are startups, then there are big companies, huge enterprises running on Ruby, and then there is the language, the framework, Rails, and everybody contributing to the open source and to the tooling. So the way I see the role of community is to build more connections, and including in-person connections that are invaluable, right? And very unique connections that we're building here in between people building tools, building open source. Sometimes, so we had folks from the core of Ruby or Rails here, and people learning Ruby or using it in their companies. So let's do that. Let's continue doing this. Let's continue building those connections. And please go ahead, talk about something you struggled with, talk about something you're thinking about. And we have a special moment at this meetup for this. We'll have an open mic as usual after the break. This is your chance to take this mic and talk about anything for a minute, basically. So it can be an announcement, it can be a question, it can be, hey, I'm looking for, I don't know, a job or an engineer or this tool, or I want to give a shout out to something. So please use this, think about it. So you're all here, not just to listen, but to be here and talk and share as well. And I'll start by sharing a few news that I really wanted to share. So one is 1Password, as you all know, joined the Rails Foundation. And what I loved about this, yeah! So what I loved about this is how they explain the reason. They say Rails is where the future is, where the community is, and where the challenge is. Could not agree more. And look, the community is definitely here. I was curious if 1Password is a big company. So apparently they raised about $1 billion VC funding. Pretty big. So cheers to another supporter of the Rails Foundation. StackBlitz, another company that has a Rails backend, achieved incredible results, kind of 8 million ARR in 2 months with Bolt.new. And yes, most of it is kind of WebAssembly and Node.js, but the backend is of the kind of platform is Rails. I know because we at Martians help with that. So this is pretty impressive, pretty exciting to see. So cheers to StackBlitz. And finally, Stepful. Stepful is a startup also built on Rails. And we're going to hear about it later today. Where's Edoardo? There he is. Perfect. So Stepful raised another successful, amazing round on financing. So let's kind of applaud to Stepful. Woo. And it's pretty cool to see a Rails-based platform for education leveraging AI. Super motivating. And a little bit about our next events. So we already have 2 more planned. One is January 16th. So as you all know, you should go to luma/sfruby and sign up. So the next event is at Product Board. Yeah, I think it's correct. And the second one is February 13th, just before. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is at GitHub. So I just confirmed it yesterday. It's pretty cool. By the way, I'm still waiting when the meetup is gonna happen at this like largest tower of San Francisco, and it's happening. It's happening. Yeah, Hiroko. Yep. Yep. But today, finally, I just added this a minute ago. If you guys know this new website, okay, it's not new, but it's being updated very actively, rubyvideo.dev, and they just created a page for our meetup, and all the videos from our meetup are gonna be uploaded there. So I'm super happy. This is gonna be the home for all the videos from this meetup. And with that, I wanna say, first of all, again, thank you to Sentry for hosting us today. But yeah, I know a bunch of Ruby and Ruby on Rails organizations and teams are using Sentry. So this is a very well-known and loved product for many. And today we will first hear from Tillman from Sentry about AI grouping, something that I'm super curious about. I hope you are too. Yeah. Give us a second. It's a new technology.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, can you guys hear me? Sweet. Hey everyone, my name's Tillman. I'm an engineering manager at Sentry, and I am going to be talking about AI grouping. So before I talk about that, I just want to quickly introduce Sentry, what we do, and what our product is, because it's going to be good context for the rest of the presentation. Quick show of hands, actually, before I get any further. Who has used Sentry before? Cool. So about half the room. For everyone else, Sentry is fundamentally, it's a tool for developers. It's a tool for developers that are shipping code to production, and they want that code to work well. And so we provide a bunch of tools to developers to debug your debug your code, understand its performance, and help you fix things as quickly as possible. So the stack kind of looks like we recently acquired CodeCov. So we have a code coverage tool that basically tells you, do you have unit tests up to date? Are you monitoring everything that you should be? And then we identify code with our error monitoring platform. And then we help you triage, debug, and resolve them. We also provide a lot of insights into the performance and the telemetry of your data. So we look at all of the traces and spans of your application. We analyze all those data, put it together in a sort of format that then you can digest and look at. And so more specifically, what does my team do at Sentry? So like I mentioned, I'm the engineering manager for the AI ML team at Sentry. And we sort of have three main objectives. The first is applying statistics to make Sentry's product smarter. And the idea here is we are ingesting a massive amount of telemetry data from our customers, and we want to make that data as useful as possible. So what can we do with that? Well, we can do things like automatically detect anomalies in the transaction data that you're sending to us. We can detect breakpoints and correlations. And one of the really interesting things that my team works on, and that Sentry is going to be building out and shipping in the coming months, is a bunch of tools that better analyze and correlate your time series data. We also, obviously, being an AI ML team, we ship a bunch of stuff in the ML space. And the idea here is how can we make Sentry smarter when it comes to making decisions, right? We want to help developers prioritize issues and consume the statistical analysis that we do to make decisions that inform like what issues actually matter to you as a developer. And then obviously we're diving into the AI space and thinking about all the opportunities there. And I'm going to be doing a demo on the thing that we see on the right here, which is our new tool called Autofix at the end of my talk. But the idea is there's a lot of opportunities for Sentry to use AI to speed up the process of triaging issues, fixing them, and identifying what's wrong. And the way I think about it is we're pulling out the useful context in this huge volume of data that Sentry has, and we're aggregating it and summarizing it in a way that's really helpful to you as a developer. So today's focus is going to be AI grouping. And what does that mean? Well, if we look at the screenshot here, this is Sentry's issue feed. So this is something that's probably very familiar to people that use Sentry on a daily basis. And what it's showing is all of the issues that we saw in your code. So each row on that page corresponds to, conceptually, a problem in your code. And one of the most foundational things that Sentry has to do really well to be a good product is group the individual error events that you send us into those buckets. So if you look here, you can see, for example, the top one has 15 errors, the next one has 171, and so on. So to be a good product, we have to be really good at taking all of the individual errors that our users send to us and aggregating into this concept of an issue. And it's a surprisingly challenging problem. There's a huge amount of nuance that goes into it. And it's something that Sentry's been working really hard to improve literally since the company was founded. So I'm going to quickly just talk about sort of the old way that we did grouping. And then I'm going to introduce the new AI grouping algorithm that my team developed. So the old algorithm was actually quite simple. We basically start out with a stack trace. So something like this, basically showing, okay, here is the call stack in your application that shows where the problem occurred. And we clean it up as best we possibly can. That's where 90% of our previous work in AI grouping, or previous work in grouping, went in, where we're basically trying to figure out what sorts of clever tricks can we do to pull out the things that are really not noise across different errors. And then we have a two-step process where we categorize those frames, and we basically, again, using heuristics, try to identify which frames from your stack trace are probably irrelevant. So for example, a system frame in an Android crash report that is not relevant to the application that had a problem. And then it's really simple. We just imagine you just take that, it's a huge string, and you literally just apply a hash function to it. And you get that. And you can actually see, by the way, all of this. If you go to the Sentry UI and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see exactly how these groups are constructed. So it's a nice solution for a couple of reasons. One, it's really simple. It's very computationally efficient, and it's just fully deterministic. The problem with it is it's also quite brittle, as I'm sure you can just immediately see from this example, right? Because the thing that we end with is a hash, right? So we make one mistake. If one character is different between two different stack traces that we clean up, you're just going to have two, unrecognizably different hashes that have no concept of similarity. And so this leads to a lot of failure modes, which a couple of them are shown here. So I think the example over on people's right is where there was a version upgrade from Python. We went from 3.10 to 3.11. And because of that, the stack trace is different on every single line, even though it's the exact same error. So my team spent a long time thinking about how we can make this better. And we came up with a few ideas. So the first thing that we considered was a sort of naive text similarity-based approach, right? Because the intuition is that we want to be more principled about thinking how these different stack traces are similar to each other, but we also need to do that in a way that's really computationally efficient because Sentry has millions of customers, we ingest billions of events every day, and we can't do something that's really good, but also too slow. So the ultimate thing that we learned from that approach is that the accuracy is just not good enough. And the reason is I'll just go back for a second. The reason why is if you just think about a stack trace, and I'm sure no one here thinks about stack traces as much as I do. At least I hope you don't, because your code will be very buggy if you do. But the just edit distance between two stack traces doesn't usually correspond to how similar or different they are. For example, you could have two stack traces with a bunch of frames that are the same, but one of them is just a fundamentally different error type than the other. And so those like first 20 characters are really important, and the rest of the characters of the whole stack trace don't really matter. There's also like another, I would say, kind of naive approach is to use an LLM to do this, because it's not a terribly hard job. It's basically, imagine you have like a relatively mid-level software engineer, and you just, hey, here's two stack traces, do they look the same? He's going to do a pretty good job of that. The problem is it's just really slow and costly. And the other thing is obviously, okay, what can we do to improve our existing fingerprint algorithm? And actually, this is something we always need to invest in, and we're still investing in, because the great thing about it, as I mentioned earlier, is it's super cheap, it's super fast, and it's super simple. But again, we really ran into a brick wall in terms of scaling that fingerprinting system, because we picked all the low-hanging fruit, and we picked all the medium-hanging fruit, and then we had really high ladders trying to get the really complicated fixes, and we kind of just ran out of steam when it came to improving that approach. And so what did we settle on? The approach we settled on is probably pretty familiar to anyone that's been developing a RAG application or worked in that space. We decided to use an embeddings model, a transformer-based text embeddings model, to create a vector representing each of our stack traces. So we took a fine-tuned model that's been fine-tuned on a large amount of coding data that has good performance characteristics and a long context window, because stack traces can be quite long. And then we combine that with a very efficient vector database. So we're using pgvector and an HNSW, hierarchical navigable small worlds index. And it's a really simple but effective combination if you want to do similarity search at a really massive scale very efficiently. And so let's see what this looks like in practice. So you start out with an input. So we have some stack trace. We are fully GA'd for the Ruby SDK. So I took a Ruby example. And what you get out is just a vector of numbers, right? So we get 768 floating point numbers that represent the semantic information of that stack trace. And that's really cool, because we have this if you think about it, what we now have is this incredibly principled way of representing a particular error event that you sent us, right? And what we can do is we can take one error event that you sent us, and then another error event that you send us, compare them to each other, and if the cosine similarity between those vectors is very high, if they're very similar, then we can be reasonably confident that the sort of context of the stack traces is virtually identical. And that's exactly what we do. So what does the kind of overall architecture here look like? Well, first, you send us an event. Then we will send the stack trace to Seer, which is our microservice that does all of this workflow. We generate the embeddings, query our Postgres database for nearest neighbors. And if we find a nearest neighbor with a sufficiently high cosine similarity, then we can reasonably determine that those things probably should be grouped together. And we do so silently. We essentially merge the issues together before there's any alert or notification made to our users. So this all happens silently behind the scenes. Productionizing it was surprisingly complicated, considering that the overall implementation conceptually is simple, right? So the API is just a few lines of code. All we do is we take the new stack trace, convert it into an embeddings representation, look for nearest neighbors, and then send the result back to Sentry's backend mono repo via an API call. But what made it challenging is we needed to spin this out as a completely separate service. So Sentry works as this monolithic monorepo, and the reason why, the reason why we had to spin this out as a separate service is because we have one, a very different performance characteristic from the rest of Sentry. Two, we have a lot of overhead, so we need to be loading these large scientific models. And three, we wanted to limit the blast radius, right? So this is sort of a new system for Sentry, and we didn't want it to cause a broader incident if there were any problems with it. I also just want to talk about some of the kind of problems and learnings that we encountered as we built it out, because I think it's maybe interesting for anyone that's exploring a similar problem space. One thing that we kind of discovered is that the HNSW index performs really well. It's a genius innovation in terms of approximate nearest neighbor search, but it's not actually perfectly aligned with our use case. And the reason why is in our use case, right? So we have maybe, let's imagine we have a billion rows that represent all the different issues across all of our different customers. We never care about comparing an issue from customer 1 to an issue from customer 2. That's never a thing we care about. We only ever want to see if within customer 1's issue or database, if a new issue from them is similar to anything else that we have. And that's actually kind of not aligned with how HNSW indexes are constructed. There's only ever one HNSW index for a table, and there's no concept of partitioning that index by some field within the table. You can't partition an HNSW index by like organization ID, for example. The best thing you can do is partition the table, shard the table, so you could have one table per organization ID, but that doesn't scale, right? You end up with a million different tables, and Postgres doesn't like, Postgres is fine with a lot of tables, but a million is too many. So the sort of compromise that we landed on is you can do something called hash partitioning. And hash partitioning is basically saying, okay, I want to turn this one table into 100 tables or 1,000 tables. And each one of those tables is going to have its own HNSW index. And that way, we've basically reduced by an order of 100 or 1,000 the number of potential candidates that would be affecting the quality of our HNSW retrieval for each individual query that we made. So this was something that we actually spent a while kind of thinking about and figuring out. And the impact on our retrieval metrics was really significant. So I will just mention this as something, let's say you're working on, for example, a RAG app or another tool that is using similarity search, and that tool has performance characteristics that sound a little bit like what I'm talking about. It may be something to keep in mind. A couple other things that are a lot more Sentry specific. There's a lot of really weird and very large stack traces out there. These introduced a lot of scalability problems with our architecture. And the reason why is all of Sentry's rate limiting technology and systems were built on this idea that like we're limiting based on the requests per second. But what really matters here is essentially the tokens per second. And Sentry until now didn't have any concept of that. And so we essentially did that. We introduced a token per second rate limit within this service as a way of further protecting it from spikes in load where some customer just starts spamming us with 8,000 token stack traces. Then the other thing that was really important was introducing circuit breakers and a graceful degradation back to our old grouping logic. And these were all done to basically ensure that as we rolled this out to our customers, nothing got worse for anyone, things only got better. And I'm happy to report that we actually, as a result of these safeguards, so we GA'd this at the end of September. And since then, we haven't had any, thankfully, we haven't had any incidents as it's rolled out to all of our customers. So just a quick update on how things are doing today. We GA'd to all of our SDKs, including, well, not to all of our SDKs. We GA'd to Python, Ruby, and JavaScript at the end of September, and we're well on our way to GAing to all other major languages by the end of the year. And it's been a huge lift. I'm really, really excited about the performance that we've seen. So over 60% of the API calls that we make to this service result in 2 issues being merged together. which basically corresponds to the reduction in issue noise. So if you're like a regular Sentry customer, hopefully you've seen some reduction in those instances where you see 3 issues on your feed and you're like, these are clearly the exact same issue. Why did Sentry do that? That's the kind of thing that we're trying to address. And that actually does it for me. I have a couple final things I want to talk about. One is, of course, that we're hiring. If anyone's interested, this is for my team. We're hiring a senior machine learning engineer to help us build out our platform. QR code's right there if anyone wants to check it out. I'll leave this up for a minute. And how am I doing on time? Do I have time to do like a 5-minute demo? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Looks like the picture taking has ended. So I'm just going to do a quick demo of, because this is an AI meetup, I want to also talk about some of the AI stuff that we're doing. Well, that's more, that was using a transformer-based embeddings model, but we'll talk about generative AI because there's also some really cool stuff there. So let me just switch tabs real quick. All right. Zoom in a little bit. Oh, that's too much. All right, that's as far as I can zoom in. So what we're looking at here is, I'm actually really happy. There seems to be some, this is very meta. We're looking at the Sentry issue of an issue within Sentry. So this is a real issue that just happened a couple hours ago. Thankfully, it's a very sort of mild, easily handled and simple error. Which is why I can do a live demo of this because no one's bothered to fix it just yet. It's essentially an edge case where you can have a division by 0 that happens when someone is, I believe, configuring like a chart or something. And so the AI thing that I want to show off is if you look at Sentry right now, like, okay, our job is to take your errors, aggregate them, give you really good context, which is exactly what we do. We have this really rich view of the stack trace, right? You can see all the variables and everything that's relevant. You can even see this concept of a breadcrumb, which is like the activity that preceded the error. If we scroll down to the bottom, just because I was talking about it, this was the grouping I was going on and on about. So this is what's going into the old grouping algorithm that precedes AI grouping. But on the AI front, we've developed a couple new features that we just EA'd to all of our early adopters about a week and a half ago. The first is this concept of an issue summary that we see in this top right corner. The issue summary is taking all of the data. Imagine like all of the data that Sentry has that may be relevant to this issue. So the stack trace, the breadcrumbs, any issues that are connected in the same trace, which in this case there are. We're basically putting all of that together and extracting the most useful sort of TLDR for a developer and showing that to you here. So what's wrong? What can we see from the trace? And what may possibly be the cause for this problem? So the goal here is just to save developers time. And if we click here in autofix, just going to start over. So this is our agentic, it's basically an agentic RAG application that is combining all of Sentry's context that may be relevant with your full code base and putting those two things together into a workflow that helps you troubleshoot and find the root cause of whatever issue that we see on Sentry, and then even generate a fix. So if I hit start the fix and we don't have anything wrong with it, because we did, to be fair, we did just EA this and we've been using autofix to do some bug bashing. But what it's basically going to do is we're going to look at, essentially we're using your stack trace as a starting point. So we're seeing all of the relevant stuff from your stack trace, figuring out where in your code we should look for more insights, looking in your code, looking at other Sentry issues as needed, and putting all of that together into a root cause summary, which we'll be showing here once it finishes running. So again, this one was a pretty simple one. We are essentially plugging in the Yeah, we're essentially plugging in the wrong date range under certain circumstances. And what's really cool about this feature is it not only does this analysis, but it also gives you really useful context as a developer to help you kind of, let's say you want to fix it yourself. And we also have a lot of ideas for passing this. Imagine like passing this context to, for example, Cursor or whatever other Gen AI tool you like to use as a developer. Imagine you just have this, you paste it in, and now it becomes really efficient for you to solve the problem because you have all the context you need right there. But we also, obviously, as I mentioned, we'll show you the code as well. And then what we can do next, if we want to use Sentry for it, is we can hit find a fix. And what Sentry is going to do is actually generate the diff for a pull request that'll then fix this issue that we had. And yeah, I just wanted to share this with all of you because I think it's a cool feature. If you are a Sentry customer and you're an early adopter, we'd love your feedback. So please try it out. And with that, I think I'm all done. Unless is there time for questions or should we just move on? Cool. TBD. We actually to be fair, we actually have a if you are in the GitHub Copilot ecosystem, we actually do have a GitHub Copilot extension. I would say the functionality is pretty moderate. Like it's pretty strict what you can do there. So it's there, but we can do better. Oh, and we have a fix. Any other questions? The question was, how do you monitor the AI grouping? So 2 ways, with Datadog and Sentry. So we use Datadog to, or were you talking about the like production sort of quality, or are you talking about like, is it doing a good job, or both? Yeah, so the quality is a really interesting one because grouping issues is inherently subjective, right? There is no like supervised model, for example, that you could use to do this problem because it's a complete chicken and the egg problem, right? We don't have like a golden data set. So what we did, I forgot to mention this, is we made a golden data set. We actually basically tricked a bunch of Sentry engineers to help us hand label several thousand rows of data. I called it an escape room, and then they came in, and then it was like, okay, you have to label, then you can escape the room. And then it's become a bit of a Sentry tradition. But yeah, so we did that to make like a really high quality labeled data set. And we can use that for offline validation. And then for online validation, really the best thing that we can do is get feedback from our users. So there's a lot of ways that people can provide feedback, and we look at that very carefully and are looking for like changes in that, especially people complaining about overgrouping. Okay, go for it. We're using so our code's all open source actually, so you can see it if you just go to GitHub. The repo is called Seer. Right now we're using a combination of Sonnet 3.5 v2 and O1 from OpenAI. Cool. Thanks everyone.
Nice. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tillman. Okay, Justin's getting ready, so we're gonna talk more. That was interesting. That's what I was about to ask. Is it open source? Any of it? Like that's. So you just said this. But by the way, can you repeat the name of the repo?
Yeah. So it's all open source. The name of the repo you can find it on GitHub. It has all of our other microservices. So the AI grouping is also there, by the way. Or sorry, the autofix and AI grouping are both in the same repo. It's just Seer, SEER, in GitHub, in the Get Sentry organization. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, it's better now. So let's talk more about open source. Okay, no echo. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk more about Ruby&AI and building better tooling for the ecosystem, which Justin was about to do. Let's learn what Justin's bringing to the table. Okay. It's called active agents. I'm kind of curious about it.
Thank you, and just bear with me while I get my screen share. Okay, thank you for the support. My name is Justin Bowen, and I am tons of fun on the internet. I've been doing Ruby for 17 years, and I even have a Ruby on my wedding ring. Some might say that Ruby is my love language. I've also done AI development for about a decade, specializing mostly in computer vision. The last year, though, I spent my time building Next.js apps that consume from a Rails monolith. And this was using Next.js and the Vercel AI SDK because Rails and Ruby doesn't really have the ecosystem for building rich apps with less code. We don't necessarily have that compression of complexity. Anyway, this is me, my wife, my cats. We live here in the Bay Area, in the Outer Sunset. I grew up in the Bay Area, and thanks to Marco, our friend that does the Ruby video dev website for this meme. If you don't know, I am the creator of Active Agent. Active Agents and Active Agent are two separate things. Active Agent is the Ruby gem that is the framework for building Rails AI applications. So let's just take a step back and talk about the Ruby AI ecosystem. I gave a talk in 2022 on this topic, and while a lot has changed in the AI space that now makes it easier to build AI applications, not a lot has changed in the Ruby tooling ecosystem. We still have very limited support for iRuby, which is interactive notebooks, which is a well-supported Python feature and a first-class supported Elixir feature, if you've ever heard of Elixir's live books. We also have very limited support for any kind of GPU-accelerated training or inference, though we did recently get GPU-accelerated Onyx runtime for running computer vision models, thanks to our friend Andrew Kane, who couldn't be with us here today, but said he might come to one of the future events. Still haven't met him in person, and just like in my talk in Houston in 2022, not sure if he's real, but he's responsible for a lot of the Ruby tools that you use and most of the Ruby AI tools that we use. What's that? PG Vector, actually, yes. Thank you for reminding me, because PG Vector is an Andrew Kane product. And so what we have right now is Ruby developers have to write more code to get less done than others. And that's not what we're used to, right? We'll shake of our head, no, we don't like that. I like to use Ruby because it's simple and productive. And Rails is supposed to compress that complexity so we don't have to deal with it in our day-to-day application development. And so Active Agent compresses that complexity for AI feature sets. So we can write less code to achieve more than other people and other stacks. Yeah. And so Active Agent, the framework, provides a comprehensive API for developing AI applications so that you can encapsulate your agent's context, the instructions, the tools they have access to perform actions with. You can use the generation provider to interface with any LLM generative AI backend. This includes their vector embedding models. And then the prompt and response cycle are also handled in a very familiar fashion. If you've ever used Action Controller, raise your hand if you've used Action Controller. Thank you. Then you should be pretty familiar with this. If you've ever used Action Mailer, same thing. So you can prompt, and then you can enqueue for generation or generate now. The response you get back will contain the context and the message sent back from the agent. Now, if we take a step back and think about agent-oriented programming, I didn't come up with this. This is a concept from the 90s, apparently. But if you look at it, it makes a lot of sense for what we're doing today. This is actually just kind of pulled out of a Wikipedia article. But in agentic design, the agent is that encapsulation of logic. The parameters that it has are, again, those tools, the instructions, and how it computes is actually kind of similar, right? Objects send messages and can provide responses. And it's the same thing with an agent. An agent can send messages. It can even trigger multiple messages by doing tool calls, because a tool call is just a message. And so the different types of messages and the constraints that you provide for your agent are how you design your agentic application. And so what's an agent? And I've mentioned this a few times, but it is the instructions, the context, the goals, and the tools. I am sweating, so I'm going to take this off 1 second. And so an agent is a part of your system that can autonomously make decisions and take action without necessarily having direct human intervention or interaction. They can handle complex tasks. They can plan, automate, do some workflows and activities to achieve whatever goal you provide them. And so what do I mean by archetype? Really, this is kind of like that first sentence that people use when they're writing a prompt, whether it's an instruction system prompt or just a prompt where you're chatting with ChatGPT. A lot of times people get in the habit of saying things like, you're Mott's, the creator of Ruby, and I want you to help me make a Ruby gem. Or you're DHH, the creator of Rails, and we're going to make a Rails plugin. And it's also common to say things like, you're an inventory manager, or you're a support specialist. So it's really just kind of that primer for what the intent is and who that agent is. So when we're talking about instructions, we want to give the agent the context, the goals, the tools that it can use to achieve the goals, and the use cases for those tools. The context itself provides the agent with the tools that it can use and the specification of those tools, along with the instructions and any messages that have been loaded in prior to the agent's action. This would include the system message for the instructions and also the prompt and response cycle messages. And so having a goal as part of your instructions, what is the outcome that you want this agent to perform, is crucial so that your agent knows what tasks it's supposed to complete and which tools it's supposed to use to perform those actions. These things can be used for data retrieval, data processing, and data augmentation, like Tillman was sharing with us. And I want to pause here because it's maybe a controversial take, though. I was talking to our friend Andre, who does the LangChain Ruby package, and he agrees with me on this. And I think Tillman would as well, since, you know, You did mention vector embedding and vector search and RAG all in the same sentence, which is fine because you can use vector search for retrieval augmented generation, but retrieval augmented generation just means providing an interface for your agent to get more information relevant to the context, including the instructions and the goals that they have to complete. So that could be like an HTTP request, a SQL query, or a vector search. A tool could also be a call to a vector embedding model to generate your vectors. And so let's talk about some of the use cases. Robotic process automation is something that's been around for years. It is why we have things like Google search, web crawling, and scraping. But recently, Anthropic announced their computer use tool, as if it were some kind of novel concept that they invented. But it basically just allows large language models to use a set of tools that allows it to see what's on the screen, get the pointer position, move the pointer, and interact with the keyboard. And this can be used for a lot of powerful things. If you can imagine, you can build applications now that interact with other applications that never were meant to have an application programming interface or don't have an SDK. This is stuff that we've been doing for a while using tools like Selenium for web applications or Appium for desktop applications. But now with large language models, you can automate some of these processes without having to hard code all of the clicks and the steps to get through these automation processes. So your application can interact directly with these apps, and you can give it the intention, maybe the URL for the web application or whatever path to execute a desktop application, and then tell it what to expect and what the outcome you want, and then of course, test and evaluate its performance going through the process and improve your prompts as you go. It can also be used for interactive voice responders. I think Irina is actually going to be talking about voice experiences, but just a high-level overview. Robocallers, I expect to get worse in the future. By worse, I mean better at what they do, but worse for us. And voice interfaces, like when you call in and you have a press 1 or press 2 for Espanol. Those kinds of interfaces are also going to get a huge improvement because now you can just connect your agent to a backend like OpenAI through their speech-to-speech interface, or even Anthropic by using Whisper.js on the front end to pass the user's speech to text to the large language model and then do speech to voice back. With a Twilio connection, now you can do phone calls. And this would allow your agent to perform actions for a user, such as calling on behalf of the user to their bank or make an appointment at the doctor's so that you don't have to. I think that was actually something that Sam Altman was quoted saying, that in 2025, we're going to see a lot more of this. And what I'd like to see is us building these things with Ruby and Rails. So there are two concepts that I've baked into Active Agent. The idea of a front-end agent and a back-end agent. It's really just, does this agent interact with the user, or is it all back-end? Typically, a front-end agent is still going to do back-end operations for retrieval and also for function calling that might present user interfaces for the user to interact with. Kind of like what we saw with Tillman when the user clicks the button to say, generate a fix for me, background job generates the fix and pushes it forward to the user. It's a little bit of both. So when we're talking about interactive conversations, we have those concepts of the agent being used to maybe fill out a form field. So if it's a long wizard, you could use this to interact with the user through text message or a chat interface. And the great thing about it, because the context is the messages, it's a resumable form. So the user can leave, they can put their phone down, they can come back later, and just resume the conversation right where they left off. This gives you the ability to have your users interact with your application in ways you wouldn't have had in the past. There's also the opportunity to interact with third parties, like I mentioned, with voice interfaces, but even email. You can have it email and interact on your behalf or on behalf of your application or your company. And then we have the autonomous operational agents. And this is, again, where you're going to think about doing your embedding generation. So you might have an agent, and it can enrich your data before you generate your embeddings so that it can embed some of the contextual information that you might need when you do perform your retrieval for vector search. So now, if you think about generating an embedding with an agent that has context of what it's supposed to do, the agent can not only use the data that it has to reference, but augment that data, then generate the embeddings. This is something I actually saw from one of the previous SF Ruby talks from the CTO of Capsule, I believe. She gave a talk on how they're using large language models and vector embeddings to see what a person is wearing in an image and ask it to generate a structured data set of a description of my shirt, maybe the material, color, my pants, the material, color, maybe brand or style, and my shoes. And instead of just generating an embedding from the picture saying, what do you see? You can have a more specific contextual embeddings that are more useful for when that agent wants to go back and reference that information. And this can be used for all of the things that people have talked about and will talk about later. So I'll just skip right along. So the idea, again, active agent, open source framework, help you build Rails apps faster, with less code, so you can have more fun. I know some people like writing code, but I just like getting stuff done and being productive. So perhaps controversial, I don't know. But yeah, your agent really can wear many hats and use many tools and take on personas. A little bit more detail about active agent from implementation standpoint. Your agent class is really just an abstract controller. And that's why I said it'll be very similar to action controller or action mailer, which are also just abstract controllers. Any action you define in your agent is a tool that your agent has access to. That tool can render HTML or JavaScript object notation for your JSON schema for the tool definition that gets passed to the context. And every agent can be configured to generate with a different provider, model, or instructions. And queued generation and streaming give you that back-end, front-end agent interface. So action prompt allows you to have dynamic prompts and generative UI. Generative UI is something that I got from Vercel's AI SDK. And then the generation provider gives you that common large language model interface, similar to LangChain, but LangChain Ruby could actually be a backend for active agent, something I want to talk to Andre about. And streaming with a proc so that you can handle the streamed response, whether it's handling the text stream or the WebSocket connection to your speech-to-speech interface using any cable. And then, of course, you can just perform generation later. And while it's in this background job of generating a response to one message, it may enqueue another message if that message is a function call. So it might retrieve information so that it can perform an action and then generate a view so that it can render the results of that action to the user. And that is it for today. I am going to be beginning consulting next year, beginning of next year. And I also will be continuing the development of Active Agent and more Ruby.AI tooling and contributing to more of Andrew Kane's stuff like the Onyx runtime in Ruby that I mentioned. So if you're interested, if your company is doing cool stuff in AI and you need some help, reach out to me. And if you're interested in contributing, I'm doing this all on my own, left my job 3 months ago. So definitely looking for contributors. And yeah, if you're interested in talking, learning more, come say hi. I don't know about questions. Do we have a break? If you want any questions. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yes, for now, but there are some things that I'm actually pulling out that should be separate gems, like the generation provider and all of the classes that are used in the prompt response cycle. So like message, prompt, action, response. Those I am planning on releasing as separate gems that you could use in your Hanami or Sinatra or Rhoda apps. So yeah. So Active Agent is coming out of some consulting work that I have been doing. So I've built an inventory management system for health tech. That's a voice interface. So that's where we're using Whisper.js on the front end, pass back to the model. And that's really just for tracking surgical objects used during procedures. So it's like a voice assistant interface. Yeah. So right now I'm only supporting like in the repo, it only supports OpenAI and Anthropic. I think there's a pull request for, but yeah, there will be support for many generation providers in the future, including Olama and all the models you can run with that. Yeah. Last question. Yeah, so you'll be able to use Olama, connect to that as your endpoint, and configure a provider for that, but not currently. So again, contributors welcome. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Justin. Our last talk before the break is Edoardo from Stepful that you heard about today. He's gonna share the story of using GenAI at Stepful, which is running on Rails. And after the break, so while Edoardo is getting set up, so after the break, by the way, I wanted to tell you something. I asked people to bring Christmas vibes. Did it work? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And so we got some Christmassy thing. So we got a selection of homemade cookies and a wonderful cheesecake. So this is I'm super grateful for everybody who brought them. This is really nice. Thank you. So we'll check this out during the break. Perfect. Yay. And by the way, yes, so we had a last minute cancellation of the speaker. And instead of Kelsey, I'm doing a talk on voice AI apps today. Some RBS. If you, like me, want to learn about it more.
New browser called Arc, and it's not working. Okay, give me a second. We'll use Safari. Yeah, I can. Yeah. It's a different account. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, so before we start, a little survey. How many engineers do we have in the room? Okay, quite a bit. How many product managers are in the room? Okay, so we are changing a little bit. This is not going to be a very technical talk. I'm going to walk you through what we do at Stepful and how do we use GenAI to scale our company. And in fact, if Justin had started his project a little bit earlier, we would probably have leveraged active agents, but actually there's a lot of code we had to write from scratch. Anyways, let's get started. So Stepful is an education tech company, and our goal is to create pathways for healthcare jobs. So we are trying to bridge the gap between the talent shortage in healthcare and unemployment. We started during the pandemic when most of the gig economy workers were losing their jobs. And so we had a huge shortage in healthcare and a huge supply in terms of workers. And we tried to find a way to bridge that gap. And bridging the gap is upskilling. And don't tell our investor I presented that way, but we are basically a boot camp for healthcare jobs. We are training people in a faster way, more efficient way, all the way to a job. And we have similar incentive structure, right? So people that don't find a job, they get the money back. So it's completely risk-free. Our mission is to empower communities with accessible pathways to healthcare careers, regardless of background or circumstance. Our demographic is mostly people that come from non-privileged categories, people that might be at their first career job, might be right out of high school or unemployed or looking for better careers. As of today, so Irina mentioned we raised our Series B, and we have 15,000 active students. So at any point in time, we have 50,000 students on our platform. And these are the main metrics. So we graduate 80% of those students, which for whoever is familiar with education tech, it's actually quite a big deal. Normally, platforms like Coursera are in the low single digits, maybe high single digits, but it's rare to see more than 10%. And we want to do it in a lean way. So we have internal metrics on students instructor ratio or students and success coach ratio. So what we need to do is to scale this company, increasing the top line number, maintaining the graduation rate, and maintaining the lean operation. So how do we do that? We realize that people graduate and perform when they have a human connection. So it would be super easy to have 15,000 instructors, one per student. We would be able to graduate everybody. But then, of course, the company would not work. And so we came with this mantra in Stepful. We say that we are scaling human connection. And how do we do that? With GenAI. So at Stepful, we are a cohort-based class. So people start and finish together. And this is important because we believe in peer-to-peer learning. We believe that students together can support each other and get to the goal together. So GenAI is enabling us to do what we call group projects. So students are gathering in groups and are performing a certain task. In this case, in this example we are looking at today, they are all playing the patient intake interview. So imagine there's a patient, imagine there's a student that plays medical assistant and ask them a few identifying questions or part of the health history and so on. And students are rotating and they are doing that in a Zoom meeting. And imagine 15,000 students in group of 4 people. Imagine how many group projects are out there. We need to grade those. And when we started Stepful, it was 2021. There was absolutely no GenAI out there. And so the idea of scaling this company seemed pretty daunting. And then as soon as ChatGPT was first released, we started like investing and see how we could use GenAI. So this is a little bit of a very ugly sketch of the infrastructure. There are students join a group meeting on Zoom that our classroom is integrated with. So it's basically on demand, and Zoom provides us with transcripts. We do some pre-processing, we talk to OpenAI, and we get the grading back, and we show them to the student. It's very simple. I just put a prompt here for reference. And this is the result. So this is one of the group projects that was graded. And Gen.AI is able to provide us with a feedback that looks very human for each student and basically a score. What did we learn here? The quantitative feedback is really bad. We didn't really manage to get Gen.AI to give a score. The number that you see on the right, where you see 100, in reality is sort of fake. There's a heuristic behind it that is basically amplifies it, and basically the minimum is 90 that students can get if they perform. But the qualitative feedback is really good, and is good at for like true or false answer. And in our prompt iteration, we are asking if the students perform a certain task, and Gen.AI works pretty well. Some numbers: 15,000 students, more than 3,000 study groups, 4 students each. For every cohort, the last 4 months, we are submitting 22,500 submission, and that's a lot of time that it was on our instructors, and now it's performed by Gen.AI. Okay, let's look at another use case, so proactive outreach. We realized at some point that depending who the success coach was interacting with the students, the graduation rate was completely different. So some coaches were achieving 90% of graduation rate, and some were achieving maybe 60%. And controlling for all other factors, the only thing that made the difference was how the coaches were talking to the students. So these are a couple of examples. And there was a very strong correlation between the first tone, more optimistic and welcoming and warm, and the second tone. And the first tone gave us graduation, the second one didn't give us outcome. So then how do we make that consistent across all the coaches? First of all, we looked at tones of those messages on our help desk, and we defined what our tone was, right? So, and we are using this slide to train our coaches in our coach academy, and at the same time, these are exactly the instruction that we are giving the LLM to outreach to our students. So this is what we built. Every student that is at risk, there's a dashboard on the learning side that is summarizing here on the left side whatever is happening with the student. So academic performance, learning feelings. The student, for instance, is overwhelmed but motivated to pass the course and start a career in healthcare. And yeah, the academic performance is not that great. The grade is 13 over 100 and low attendance. All this is summarized by all the attendance data and the email conversation that we have from the students that you can see on the right. So our coach goes to this page when the student is at risk and has a new message in email and SMS form that is ready to be sent to the student. What worked well? So, well, the professional tone is super consistent. That was what we wanted to achieve at the beginning. But I put a thumbs up and a thumb down because it's, at the end of the day, the professional tone lacks a bit of personality, and it's a little bit too consistent. It's great at providing action items. So it's great at summarizing from whatever the student has missed, what the student has to do. So you see, for instance, that in the message, the last row is an assignment, the NHA mock exam, which is an action that the student has to take. And includes sometimes irrelevant information. It's very hard to understand from the conversation what is relevant and what is not relevant, and sometimes there are sort of hallucination, if you want to call it that way. Again, 15,000 students, 40 success coaches. 80% adoption rate, 30 outreach messages per coach per day. And the problem we wanted to solve was consistent outcome. And so now there is not, there are no more correlation between coaches and outcomes. It's consistent across the board. Third and last use cases. At the end of the learning journey, our students are looking to find a job. And so we are, most of them, they don't have a resume. They are not trained. They are starting a career, or they are just coming from the gig economy. So our goal is to give them a tool in form of a resume that they can use to find a job. And the best way we found to do it is, first of all, we just open some free text. We ask them to copy and paste whatever they have in whatever form. And then we start asking questions. So we start making sure that in that amount of text, we can identify the city where they live. We can, and then we go by each of the job position that they are specifying, and we are asking for a start date, for an end date, etc. And this is a lot of prompt chaining based on the initial prompt. And every time that the student is adding a question, we are adding that back into the resume, and we keep iterating. So this becomes a very customized wizard for the students to give us all the information that we need to generate the resume. This is the outcome. It's a fully formatted Google Docs that they can export to PDF and use for their job search. What worked well? The tone works really well. The text composition combining topics works really well. Formats, so-so. And there are a lot of errors. And in fact, we are generating that in Google Docs so that the student has the final authority on what to do with the resume. Having a look at the impact, 15,000 students, of which 9,000 get to the point that they are looking for a job. Some of them, they are already finding a job, or some of them, they drop out. Multiple iteration per student. What we did it before, we had professional resume editors that they were interacting with the student, asking questions, and basically doing what the AI does in a manual way. We saved around 9,000 hours, and most importantly was like $50 per every resume, so that's a big financial saving, and we have consistent outcomes. What's the future for AI at Stepful? Soft skills. So it's super important for our students to be ready to interview and keep building on the patient simulations. In fact, our AI group projects are as far as I know, are the first one that are approved by one of the certification institution in the, I think it's called ASHP, which is a board for pharmacy technician. And it basically replaces real life simulations. So we managed to have them approve this way of learning to replace some part of the live curriculum. Of course, adaptive learning is where everyone is going. So providing catch-up content for specific areas and personalizing to the student learning style. Our students are not classic learners, are not academic learners. They wouldn't really perform well on a book. They perform really well with bite-sized content and with content that they can squeeze in different time of their days. And also we are building, so we are scaling our instructor workforce, and we need them to be trained consistently, improving their in-class lecture and guiding them through tough conversation. Okay, so as we said, Active Agent was not there, so we had to build some iteration framework to make sure that we were iterating on the prompts. So I'm going to do a little demo of that. Can you see this? Oh, okay. Okay, so we built this with A/B testing in mind. And so each of these prompts has a a purpose, and a variant. Let's pick one. So this is the instructor student outreach. And oh. Okay, I'm not able to edit it. Okay, so let's skip the demo. All right, so after this talk, a couple of things you can think. First of all is, hey, all this framework looks right out of the 90s. These guys really are trying to do Gen AI, but actually they don't really know what they are doing, and that's great. Or is, hey, this is a great mission, and I would really like to help these guys achieving what they want to do. In both cases, we are hiring. So in both cases, reach out. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Stepful, and we are doubling down on our Gen AI investments and hiring to product engineer, AI product engineer, engineering managers, and at different level of seniority. Any question?
Yeah, it might be that everybody's just a bit kind of tired and want to go into the break. So how about this? Let's go into the break, and if you have more questions for Edoardo, find him here. Yep. So yeah, thank you. Okay, going into the break, and I'll see you back here in 20 minutes for the open mic. And then Kamil with Lemmy, and me with voice apps.
Hi, I'm Ken. Last time I neglected to introduce myself properly. Ken at 41 Monkeys. You'll never forget that. Ken at 41 Monkeys. Okay, so question. Years and years ago, there was a lot of different ways to be able to learn Rails if you were new to Rails. So the question that I'm curious today is, and shout it out, what do you think are the best content to be able to learn Rails? If you had no knowledge of Rails and you wanted to learn Rails, what do you think is the best way to learn Rails? Go Rails? Go Rails, we heard Go Rails. What else? ChatGPT. Okay, let's put that at the bottom of the list for now. Practice is good, but that's what we're trying to get to, is practice. Hartles, Michael Hartles. So years ago, there was a guy named Michael Hartle that had a wonderful website. I have no idea if his stuff is current. So does anybody know if Hartle's stuff is still current today? Hands somewhere? Yes, no? Any case. All right, well, and again, still from last month or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, if you're looking for a product manager, Ken at 41 Monkeys.
Number 2. Chris?
Oh. Too hard. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Hobbs, and I run epicstrips.tv, which is an AI comic strip generator. Maybe she'll put it on the screen. But it's running Sinatra on Lambdas, and I needed a way to generate my AI jobs. So I used active jobs, and I learned that there's a queue adapter for SQS on Amazon. So that's the convoluted way I get my AI jobs. Maybe there's a better way to run AI jobs, but I haven't said the word Rails, so no Rails, please. That's it. Oh, yeah, if you can put it on, sure. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
We need an internet connection? Or did I mistype it? Oh, sorry.
I might have scaled smaller fonts here.
And someone wanted to generate a comic about Link killing baby deer. I don't know why. All right, thank you.
Oh. This is Sinatra. Yeah, nice. Rhiannon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rhiannon Payne. Some of you probably have met me and know me as Justin's wife. I am not a software engineer, but I have been going to Ruby and Rails conferences, probably about a dozen at this point since 2022 across at least 3 countries. So I've mostly been going to have a good time and hang out with the community, which has always been so welcoming and, you know, just lots of fun to hang out and vibe with. More recently, though, I actually started working with Ruby Central. Thank you, Adarsh, who I met at Ruby Kaigi actually in May at karaoke, and that's a story for another time. But yeah, for the past 7 weeks, I've been leading marketing for Ruby Central. You probably know us as the nonprofit that oversees RailsConf and RubyConf, as well as Bundler, Ruby Gems, rubygems.org, and basically all of the crucial open source work that you guys use every day. So going into next year at Ruby Central, we're going to be looking to do a lot more in terms of community engagement and just like looking for different ways to engage and develop the Ruby community and help it continue to grow. So if anyone has any interesting thoughts about that or ideas or wants to collaborate on something, we're definitely open. So get in touch with me, Rhiannon at rubycentral.org. My name is hard to spell. You'll have to figure that out. Or just come find me here and we can connect on LinkedIn. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Okay, now continuing into the talks, and now Kamil. Kamil's gonna share more code today, right? Are you sharing more code? More code, and this is an open source library for LLMs for Ruby. Yeah, I'm.
So I just joined the call.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, I was a bit worried about the echo again. Okay, Kamil, take it away.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Kamil, and I'm going to talk about Lamy, which is my library for integrating LLMs with Ruby. I called it Lamy, but apparently after this meeting, I should rename it to yet another AI Ruby library, because apparently, you know, you come to an event and there's like 5 of them. So, but it's a different approach, I think. Like, so you'll be able to judge yourself which one you like more. This one is, I think, more lightweight than what Justin presented before. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a lead software engineer at Plane. We are an HR company dealing with payroll. We are a YC startup, and we're hiring. So if anybody is looking for a Ruby job and a Rails job, then please go to our website and check it out. That's Matt, our CEO. Talk to him. He's going to be the most knowledgeable person about the process. I'm also, I've co-founded several startups in the past. I'm temporarily retired right now for 4 years now. It's been a difficult journey, as it is always with every company you found. So I'm resting. I wrote a few books about testing, product management, most recently AI product management, building products powered by generative AI. And I'm also a blogger. I write about technology, startups, all of the fun stuff. And this is Lami. As I said, it's very lightweight. There's not a lot of philosophy, so I'll jump straight to the code. The main concept of Lami is that the prompts are methods, and we put those methods directly on the models or whatever classes we might have in our application. It might be a RISE application, it might be some different framework. Lami doesn't really care. As you can see in this example, we have a simple user model, and then it can be also an active record model. In this case, it's just a simple Ruby class. And then we have a welcome method, and on the top of this method, we add an LLM decorator. It lets us configure the settings of the model. In this case, we choose the GPT-4o model, and then we put the content of the prompt into the method, and that's it. It just works. It returns the answer from the API. And you might think that this is very simple, and it is, but it's also very easy to use. So you don't have this philosophy of like building an agent, having a separate directory for it. You just put it into whatever you already have, and you use it like, like every single any other method in your system that you have. So you obviously sometimes want to provide also system messages, right? So in this case, you use the context method. In this case, I ordered the model to write in lowercase. And this is how you build the entire content of the prompt, entire conversation that goes into the model and is later routed through the request to the API of ChatGPT. Another thing that I found that was very annoying to do when working with LLMs is structured outputs. So for example, you want to force the LLM to return JSON, right? It was practically impossible to do before with 100% consistency. OpenAI added structured outputs, but the problem is that it's a JSON schema. So I don't like writing JSON schemas. I want to, avoid all of the things that are related to it. Before Lami, I just used ChatGPT to write schemas for ChatGPT. So that was kind of pointless. In this case, I am using this syntax that I created. Again, I have the user model. I add the concern, which I forgot to talk about in the previous slide, but this is the most important thing here. This enables the decorator, and then in the decorator, I say what the schema is. In this case, it's going to be an array containing objects with keys name and city. Very, very simple. I also added support for Anthropic models. Anthropic doesn't have, as far as I know, support for structured outputs, but what they do is they have support for pre-filling responses. It doesn't necessarily have to be JSON. It can be whatever you want. And in this case, to make it consistent, I added a JSON example. And as you can see, I added a separate syntax, which is also useful for some other stuff that I'm going to show. In this case, it's an array syntax. You define a message from the user, and then define the response or the beginning of the response from the assistant, and the assistant will just follow it. So whatever it returns is you just follow the schema that you provided it with, and that's going to be the response. Okay, now the fun part. There's also support for streaming. In this case, if I want to receive chunks of the response, I use the stream method and pass whatever I want to do with the chunk that I received into the Lambda. This is a very simple example, but you can do some fun stuff with it. Here's a more advanced one. So it's a little bit tiny, so I'm going to walk you through it. First, we define some message concept, like a domain model. It can be just an active record model, whatever. Then we have a chat. The chat has a history. The history contains many messages, either from the assistants or the user, pretty basic stuff. whenever you build a chatbot using any of these LLMs, you know how it works. And then we have the bot class, which manages the state of the chat history. It has a talk method, and then it adds the new message that was sent to the user to the history. It adds a new empty response from the assistant, and then it streams all the new content that comes from the model, from the API. It adds to the history, to the last message, and then returns the history of the chat in the RI syntax that I just shown you. So basically, to ensure that we always send the entire history of the conversation to the model, we return the array of messages, right? So in this case, I initialize the bot class, I send the message, hello, how are you? The response is streamed to the console, and I can also view it in the history of the chat. So very object-oriented approach, right? We built an entire very simple agent with just a few lines of code. No need to define anything. It can just live in the app models directory in our app, right? So it's not a separate layer. And I think this is the biggest difference from the approach that was shown previously in the second presentation or the first one. I don't know. That framework was about creating a new layer and adding support for it. And here you just, if you need something lightweight in your existing layers, then you use Lamy and add the concern and use the methods. Obviously, since those requests can take a while and are pretty heavy when it comes to computing, you want to do them asynchronously. In this case, I added an async option to the decorator. And what you do, you include a sidekick worker that will handle it. And then that content is being handled on the backend and processed asynchronously whenever you actually initialize the model and then use the talk method, which is AI enabled, then you're just going to get a string of the ID of the job that was created, and the rest will be handled asynchronously. There's also support for vision. In this case, again, we use the array syntax, in this case, without an array, but it's very similar. So I have an image model. I tell it to describe this image, and I include the image in the request. It's very simple, very easy, no additional work required. There's also a possibility to use custom clients. In this case, I'm using Helicon, which is an observability tool for LLMs. So whenever I want to have some software in the middle that basically captures all my requests and then does something with them, I don't know, for A/B testing, for whatever metrics that we want to have with our LLMs, then we can just pass it in, have the client be replaced, like the default client is being replaced, and all of the other features works the same as they used to. The last feature, although this feature is still a work in progress, is embeddings. So I added support for it because I needed it for one project. So basically, I thought it would be a nice expansion. However, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on it. There's no chunking. It's a very naive implementation. It just uses a OpenAI model for embeddings that returns an array of vectors that you can do, that you can use for vector search or semantic search, PG vector, stuff like that. We already had some examples in previous talks today of using a technology like that. So it's also possible using Lamy, but more work will be required for this to be like production grade. Right now, it's more of an experiment. Yeah, so that slide is basically what I just said. And that's it. As I said, very, very simple, very easy. code-oriented. If you have any questions, go ahead. There's also the QR code for the repo. It's a very new thing. I just finished like the latest version a month ago. So if you have any feedback at all, feel free. You like it, you don't like it, you think it is an abomination. I will hear about it because I don't know if I should put more effort into it. If people will like it, I'll work on it. If they don't like it, then I'll find something else. Okay. Right now, OpenAI and Anthropic. So I just focused on the one I use. I signed up for an AI Ruby Discord some time ago, and there was a lot of requests for some new stuff to be added, but I didn't do it yet because, as I said, I didn't know whether to invest or not. But there is a possibility. Like the idea is that you don't have to care about what the model is. You just change it on the fly. And you can even have like multiple prompts using multiple models, right? Yeah. The creator. Yeah, so this approach is actually based on a Python library called L, which I liked a lot. And I thought, oh, this is so nice. We could have something like that in the Ruby community. So I just ported it. And I think there is, like, this is the most controversial part. The other one is naming the concern L. People don't like magic letters, magic numbers. So this is what they disliked. But using the decorator is, I don't think it's a often used pattern in the Ruby world. I had some like inspiration from how you use Sorbet, and you have the SIG decorator. So there is some precedence for stuff like that. But I think this is if you like it, then you like the gem. If you don't like it, then you don't like the gem. I liked it as well because I thought it's very easy to like use, right? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kamil. Okay, how's everybody feeling? Good. Yeah, I'm scared because I'm gonna try and do a live demo of a voice app. Yeah. Okay, but first let me figure out this technology. Okay. Okay. All right. It works. Okay. We're gonna see how technology works. Or how it feels. Okay, but first, yeah, we're gonna talk about voice apps now, and there are some kind of hypothetical reasons why you might be interested, including kind of like Sam Altman mentioned before, saying that, okay, there's like, oh my God, there's this expected growth in AI customer interactions, but also if you think about, by the way, it's mostly the United States that is where the country where anything is going through phone calls. Anyway, So explain. In many places in the world, you don't have to call any number to get any like support or have your bank account, whatever, working. Yeah, facts. By the way, I have a company in Japan. Just email, chats, chatbots. People use technology, other technologies. But okay, here in the United States, we like being on the phones, talking to people, right? Not me, by the way. But so when we think about, okay, voice AI, right? Voice apps, there's a lot of kind of business explanations, blah, blah, blah. But the real reason why we're thinking about this is just that there are new APIs that are finally making those robots kind of better or not awful. Not seriously, that's what's happening. I mean, you probably saw those demos from OpenAI where the voice is not, the kind of does not suck, but the reason is it's fast. The main reason why it kind of sucks, I think, is because it was so slow, and waiting for robots is like not what we want to spend our life doing. Well, now we have to try it. Wait a sec. It's not a touch. By the way, me with my accent, it's much harder. Have some sympathy.
Hi, I'm Onyx. I can tell you about your planned task and help.
It's not working, right?
What would you like to do? Hi, how can I assist?
I forgot. I should open something. Wait a second. But you didn't hear anything, right? Yeah. Sorry. I knew this mic is not catching it. But yeah, I'm on speaker. This mic is kind of weird. I'm kind of nervous as is. Well, so let me first explain what we got here on the screen. So on the left is our app. On the right is something like logs. By the way, I'm pretty sure all those WebSocket connections died, but you didn't see me just refreshing them. Yeah. Okay, let's kind of try again. And if you don't hear it, sorry, I cannot do anything. Okay, now even I cannot hear it.
Hi, I'm Simmer. I can tell you about your planned tasks and help you manage them. What would you like to do? Hello, how can I help with your tasks or schedule?
I didn't like it. Okay, let's try again. Sorry, guys.
Hi, I'm Alloy. I can tell you about your planned tasks and help you manage them. What would you like to do?
Create a
Hello,
new
how can I
task
help you
for
with your
today.
weekly planning today? Let's get started. What would you like to do first? Check your tasks. Please let me know how I can assist you with your tasks.
Yeah, create a new task, run Ruby Meetup today.
On what date would you like to set the deadline for this task?
Today.
I'll add the task, run Ruby Meetup, for today, December 3rd. Please give me a moment.
Okay. Okay, it continues.
Happy to help.
Thanks so much. Don't forget to say thank you to your robots. Just in case. Oh, by the way, I should have clicked here, but we'll talk about this in a second. okay, I'm not a particularly big fan of this demo. We keep running into OpenAI rate limiting, but let's talk about the code behind this. So, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Irina Nazarova. I'm the CEO at Evil Martians. So if you've never been on our website, you should do it today. So we are tech consultants supporting startups, mostly building products for engineers. This is our focus. And this talk is actually based on the blog post about building voice apps. That is one of our recent blog posts. So there's a link. If you're curious, just check it out. But it's kind of, I'll just break it down for you in a more maybe simple way. So basically, when we want to build voice app, we have a few pieces. So one is Twilio. Twilio is just what gives you this media stream, like a phone line, a phone number to call. OpenAI we use to generate, first of all, parse the parse speech and then generate the response. We use Rails because it's the best way to describe business logic, the most productive way. And then we use AnyCable for this WebSocket real-time connection. And I'll explain something in a sec. So yeah, I call this number, right? And then Twilio creates this media stream. AnyCable connects to it. And then audio is processed. But here, actually in between, there might be a lot of stuff going on. And this is all happening in AnyCable Go. So first of all, there's encoding, decoding of the streams. But also, when we'll talk about it in a sec, when we give tools to OpenAI, this is where it becomes meaningful because OpenAI inside the conversation can say, hey, I want to request this data from the database. Or, hey, I want to perform this action. And for all of that to happen without delays, but like in real time within the conversation, this has to be a bidirectional WebSocket connection. And yeah, and that's the reason that Rails is great for this use case is that we have ActionCable and AnyCable that I'm co-founder of. Because yes, we have this very native abstraction for bidirectional WebSockets in Rails. It's called ActionCable channels. Okay, how many of you used ActionCable? Okay, about a quarter of people. I'd say 25%. So not super familiar. So what? It's autoplay? Okay. Let me explain what's going on here. So ActionCable channels is our abstraction for WebSockets, right? So we just use them for Twilio media streams, to handle Twilio media streams. So we just create a class, which is like an ActionCable channel, and then okay, this is what we're doing after subscription. It's kind of, I don't know if it's cryptic, but basically, yeah, we're just doing the greeting that we want, and then we yeah, then we basically this is just the greeting. Yeah, this is just the greeting to send back to you. By the way, when we were testing today, I think at least once we heard 2 greetings. You heard this, right? So interesting. But here's okay. Here's what's kind of driving me crazy, but we're gonna discuss this in a sec. I think we didn't discuss code today too much, right? Enough. So it was not enough code. So let's do more of that. And to be honest, I normally skip meta programming in Ruby because, folks, I'm the CEO. I'm not an engineer, but this is actually interesting. So inside this channel, right, that we created, we can create tools for OpenAI to use, because OpenAI wants to use tools to invoke tools in real time. I mean, at least, of course, it's not necessary. We can say, hey, don't do it in real time, do it kind of slowly over HTTP. But we want it to happen as soon as possible so that inside the conversation, the person is not waiting for every phrase to end and only then it will call something. We want it to happen as fast as possible, right? So what we are doing, we are essentially describing tools as Ruby methods inside this channel class. And this becomes this becomes the description of the tool, and this becomes so this is RBS. Okay, how many people used RBS? Okay, I'm not alone in my non-familiarity sort of with this. But basically, we want to respond with JSON that OpenAI wants. OpenAI wants a JSON schema. And RBS is just a very kind of nice tool here to describe JSON schema. We don't have to then we don't have to have it in two places. We just keep it here as RBS signature. And so that when we say respond as JSON, it will generate the correct schema, and you can even test that everything is correct, sort of. Yeah, you can test. You can write a test. By the way, we don't have tests in this repo. I'm sorry. Yeah, yet, let's say. But you can write a test that will be checking that this corresponds to this, right? So what's? Oh, yeah. I just told you this, I guess. So, but by the way, how many people don't know what OpenAI tool is? Some people don't know. Okay, OpenAI tool is just a function that OpenAI will call inside your application when OpenAI decides to do that. So it's we give it tools. By the way, I think I have slides. We give it. Wait a sec. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is that's the right place. Yeah, this is just configuration. Oh, yeah, actually, look at this. So these are tools. These are tools that we generate from those Ruby methods that we just wrote. So this one line is given OpenAI all the kind of JSON schema that it needs to know which methods in your application it can run when it needs to perform, you could say, just a normal API call inside your application, but it's not an API, it's a function calling. So it's calling this method. So basically, it's the same concept as RPC, but I don't know if it's making it more clear or not. But yeah, basically it's just, we either request data or we change data, right? So sort of, you could see like a CRUD operations, right? We can create tasks, edit, whatever. So these are, by the way, if you go check the article, you will see much more stuff going on there. And a lot of it is what's happening on the Anycable side. So Anycable is doing a bunch of stuff, encoding, decoding, dealing with chunks of audio and stuff, but it's all already done. We've already open sourced all of that. So you can just use it as is, basically. And as a inside Rails, you have very kind of, again, another approach, but it kind of works pretty nicely for this case. So in that case, you have just a few lines of code, and you can check the repo, write some tests, send a PR, just in case. And yeah, sure. Sure, but so check out the repo and also check out the blog post. So, but by the way, there's a version without RBS that is just a bit more verbose because we have to do a few things that we can automatically achieve with RBS. So read the blog post. It kind of explains stuff in detail, and let's build voice apps with Rails. That's the whole point. Let's do it. Follow me on Blue Sky. Yeah, thank you. Nice. One more. Yep. Okay. Did you like the crash course into RBS? I think it's crazy. Anyway. Okay, that's it. That's that. If you have questions, ask away. I'm not gonna be able to ask. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, go ahead, Kamil. Yeah, the question is if tool. You mean like this? So is it custom? No. This is just this is okay. Some people call it normal Ruby. Okay, but basically, this is. I mean, if you don't look at all of this stuff, this is just a Ruby method. I mean, you mean this word? Yeah, good question. And this actually, I think, goes into just kind of tells. This is a class name, I think. Wait a sec. Okay. I feel like I'm failing here. No. It's not. So first of all, check out the report. It's nothing custom. It doesn't have anything to do with any cable. So it's just to output the tools, the JSON. It's just like a keyword used to output the JSON. And yeah, I was also confused, to be honest, with this thing. But basically, what I'm trying to say is any cable doesn't know anything about the business logic. That's the whole point. Any cable is only doing kind of broader, in a broader sense, networking infrastructure. And I mean, encoding, decoding, it's networking, right? And all the business logic always is on Rails, in Rails here. Justin? No? That was, oh, you were also every. Yeah, you should ask Vladimir Dementiv about this. I know he's sometimes doing some magic in Ruby that I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And yep, please please reach out to Evil Martians, etc. Yeah. Okay, we are almost on time finishing the meetup. And we still have here till 9 p.m. And by the way, one final announcement. Next time, January 16th, after Christmas, after New Year, after all your hangover and stuff. Jason Svet is coming all the way from Michigan. Woo. Yeah. So, yep, please bring your Ruby friends to our meetup, submit your talks. So the next meetups are not AI focused, so we'll take more CFPs and we'll just do more stuff. So yeah, let's build more with Ruby, right? Oh, I have Evil Martians stickers and any cable stickers here. If somebody wants, let me know. Final shout out to Team Sentry. Team, do we have somebody from Sentry? You guys did such a good job.